There's a dinner happening right now in a townhouse in Boston, a country estate in Virginia, or a private club in London. And if you somehow found yourself seated at that table, you would know within 60 seconds that you didn't belong. Not because anyone was rude to you, not because anyone said anything unkind, but because of 100 tiny invisible signals. The way you held your glass, the question you asked, the name you dropped, the compliment you gave. That would mark you, quietly and permanently, as someone who had never been taught the rules. And here's the thing, nobody explains these rules. They're not in any book you can buy. They're not taught in school, even the most expensive schools. They're absorbed, passed down, learned by osmosis through decades of exposure. Today, we're going to explain them anyway. Welcome. Let's talk about the social rules of old money that nobody explains. Understanding old money, what it actually is. Before we get into the rules, we need to understand what old money actually means, because most people have the wrong idea. Old money is not about being rich. There are plenty of people with more money than any old money family who would never, in 1,000 years, be accepted into those circles. Silicon Valley billionaires, lottery winners, overnight celebrities, they have the wealth, they don't have the culture. Old money refers to families whose wealth has persisted across multiple generations, typically 3 or more, and who have, over that time, developed a distinct set of values, behaviors, aesthetic sensibilities, and social codes that set them apart from what they quietly call new money. The distinction goes back centuries. In Europe, it was the aristocracy versus the merchant class, people who had land, title, and heritage on one side, and people who merely had money on the other. In America, families like the Vanderbilts, Roosevelts, Mellons, Biddles, and Cabots built dynastic wealth in the 18th and 19th centuries, and their descendants, even those who've lost much of the fortune, still carry the cultural DNA. But here's what's critical to understand. Old money culture is not primarily about spending. It's about restraint. It's about subtlety. It's about a deep, almost allergic aversion to being seen trying too hard. New money shows. Old money knows. Keep that distinction in your mind as we go through everything that follows. Every single rule we discuss flows from that one core principle. The rule of invisibility: never let wealth be the story. The first and perhaps most fundamental rule of old money social culture is this: wealth must never be the center of attention. This sounds simple. It is not. In new money culture, wealth is the point. The Ferrari in the driveway says, "Look what I have." The designer logo on the handbag says, "Look what I can afford." The name dropping says, "Look who I know." The Instagram post from the private jet says, "Look at my life." Old money culture considers all of this deeply, painfully embarrassing. There is a term used in these circles, sometimes spoken, more often implied, and that term is vulgar. Not vulgar in the sense of crude language, vulgar in the original Latin sense, common, of the crowd, trying to impress. In old money households, children are taught from an early age that discussing money is inappropriate, not illegal, not immoral, simply not done. You don't mention what things cost. You don't ask what others earn. You don't volunteer your net worth. You don't brag about a deal you got. You don't complain about prices. All of these behaviors, whether boasting or lamenting, draw attention to money, and drawing attention to money is considered the mark of someone who is defined by it. The old money wealthy are often intentionally inconspicuous. They drive the same Volvo for 15 years. They wear the same tweed jacket for 3 decades. Their homes, when you finally see them, may be large, but they're often slightly worn, deliberately unfashionable, filled with the same furniture that's been there since their grandparents were young. This isn't poverty. This is a statement. The statement is, we are so secure in who we are that we have nothing to prove. Contrast this with the new money instinct, which is to signal, to use visible luxury as proof of arrival. Old money doesn't need to signal. They already arrived 3 generations ago. The language of understatement. If the rule of invisibility governs behavior, then understatement governs language. And this is where things get fascinatingly specific. Old money families have developed what linguists might call a dialect of deliberate minimization. When something is excellent, they call it not bad. When they're impressed, they say, that's rather good. When they love something, it's quite nice. When a person is brilliant, they're fairly clever. Superlatives are suspect. Enthusiasm is moderated. The higher the praise, the more quietly it is delivered. This isn't false modesty. It's a form of social signaling. It says, I am so accustomed to quality, to beauty, to excellence, that I don't need to gush over it. I receive it the way I receive a good breakfast, with appreciation, but without spectacle. The inverse is equally true. Old money doesn't complain loudly about discomfort. If the hotel room is substandard, they don't make a scene. They say the room was a bit tired and quietly ensure they never return. If the food at a dinner party is poor, they eat it pleasantly and say, what a lovely evening on the way out. The rule is never make your hosts uncomfortable. Never put someone in the position of having to defend or apologize. There's also a very specific old money relationship with the word interesting. In most of the world, interesting is a genuine compliment. In old money circles, that's very interesting often means the precise opposite. It is a polite way of expressing skepticism, disagreement, or mild horror without being openly confrontational. Learning to read the tone behind that word is an essential social skill in these environments. Similarly, I'll bear that in mind means no. We should get together sometime means probably not. You must come for dinner is sometimes sincere and sometimes a social courtesy that should not be immediately calendared. Old money communication operates on 2 levels simultaneously, the literal and the social. You must learn to hear both. The dress code. Nobody writes down. Let's talk about clothes, because old money has extremely specific, extremely unwritten rules about dress. The overarching principle, quality over fashion always. Old money dresses for permanence. They buy things that last, preferably British or American heritage brands, with decades of craftsmanship behind them. A Barber jacket, Church's shoes, a Hermes scarf purchased 30 years ago that still looks impeccable. A cashmere sweater in navy or camel that cost a great deal when bought and will be worn for the next 20 years. What old money does not wear is anything that is of this moment. Trend chasing is considered as vulgar as logo displaying because it reveals that you're watching the crowd and trying to keep up with it. Old money isn't watching the crowd watches old money. Logos are a particularly interesting case. In the world of new money luxury, visible logos are the entire point. The LV monogram, the Gucci pattern, the Burberry plaid in its most aggressive form. Old money may own these things, but they're likely to choose the versions without the logo, or the versions so subtle that only another insider would recognize them. A plain Hermes belt, no H-buckle. A bag whose quality is evident in its leather and stitching, not in its branding. This extends to color and pattern. Old money palettes are dominated by navy, camel, cream, forest green, burgundy, and gray, colors that don't shout. Patterns are subtle, fine checks, small plaids, understated stripes. Nothing neon, nothing asymmetrical, nothing that makes you the first thing people see when you walk into a room. Fit and condition matter enormously. Old money doesn't necessarily wear expensive clothes right now. They wear clothes that fit beautifully, are in perfect repair, and have been cared for. Worn leather shoes that have been polished for 20 years are more acceptable than new shoes that are poorly maintained. Pressed trousers in a modest fabric outrank wrinkled trousers in an expensive one. The concept of shabby gentility is real in old money circles. A worn-at-the-elbow cashmere jacket is not embarrassing. It's proof that you've had cashmere so long it's worn through. The newness of luxury is, paradoxically, a sign of the newness of the person wearing it. One final note on dress. Overdressing is as frowned upon as underdressing. Arriving at a casual country dinner in a suit is as much a social error as arriving at a formal event in jeans. Old money reads the room perfectly because they've been in every room since childhood. The social calendar and the rituals within it. Old money lives by a social calendar that is, to outsiders, almost entirely invisible, but to insiders, as structured as a liturgical year. There are seasons, there are events, there are unspoken rules about who attends what those events mean, and how one conducts oneself within them. In the Anglo-American old money tradition, the social calendar has historically revolved around country weekends. The invitation to someone's country house or estate is among the highest value social currencies in old money circles. These are not like weekend getaways. They are multi-day social assessments. Guests are observed at table, in the field, in informal conversation, and in how they interact with staff. A guest who passes all these tests, who is charming without being ingratiating, who eats well, drinks moderately, sleeps appropriately, thanks the staff, and contributes to conversation, will be invited back. A guest who fails any of these tests, however subtly, may receive a polite but final goodbye. The club. Private clubs in old money culture are not luxury amenities. They are institutions. The club is where you breakfast with your contemporaries before the working day, where you lunch on Tuesday with your oldest friends, where you sit in a leather chair with a newspaper and exist in the quiet company of people who understand precisely who you are. Being proposed for a club, being accepted by a club, and being seen regularly at a club are all significant social markers. There are clubs in New York, Boston, Philadelphia, London, and Edinburgh whose waiting lists span decades and whose membership rosters read like a genealogy of the old money world. Sporting events and field sports, hunting, shooting, fishing, polo, sailing, horse racing. These are not merely hobbies in old money culture. They are social rituals with centuries of codified behavior attached. How you conduct yourself at the shoot, whether you're safe, whether you're gracious when you miss, whether you thank the gamekeeper, tells experienced observers everything about your upbringing. The same is true at the regatta, on the polo field, or at the race meeting. These are arenas where character is assessed by the performance of ritual, charitable and institutional events, museum galas, hospital benefits, university functions. Old money participates in philanthropy, not primarily for recognition. New money puts their name on buildings. old money often gives anonymously, but because civic responsibility is considered an inherent obligation of inherited privilege. The concept of noblesse oblige, the idea that nobility creates obligation, is genuinely held in old money culture, even when stripped of its aristocratic context. You have been given much. You owe much. This is not questioned. The table, where old money is most visible nowhere, are old money social rules more dense, more specific, and more unforgiving than at the dining table. The table is old money's theater, and every detail is a performance. Let's go through the key rules. Arriving and seating. You wait to be seated. You do not choose your own chair, even in an informal setting. The host seats you, and the placement reflects a careful social calculus, alternating genders in formal settings, separating couples, placing important guests near the host. You accept your placement without comment. The napkin. The moment you sit, the napkin goes on the lap. Fully unfolded if a luncheon napkin. Folded in half if a large dinner napkin. It stays on the lap during the meal. It is never tucked into a collar. If you leave the table temporarily, it is placed on your chair, not on the table. When the meal is over, it is placed loosely to the left of your setting, not folded, not crumpled, but placed, as if it still matters. The silverware. The general rule, work from the outside in, is something most people know. But the finer points are less known. You don't gesture with silverware. You don't wave a fork to make a point. You don't cut everything at once like you're prepping a meal. You cut one bite, eat it, cut again. The knife, when not in use, rests angled across the top of the plate. The fork, in the continental style, held in the left hand throughout, is never switched. Americans in old money. Circles often use continental style, not the American habit of cutting then switching. The latter is considered something of a giveaway. The bread. Bread is torn, never cut. You tear off one small piece, butter it, from your butter plate using your butter knife, not the communal knife, and eat that piece before tearing another. You don't butter the whole slice at once. This is not about rationing. It is about pacing, about being fully present in the meal, about refusing to treat food as something to be consumed in volume rather than appreciated in detail. Conversation at table. The rules here are substantial. You engage primarily with the guest to your left during the first course, then turn to the right for the second. This is called turning the table and ensures no guest is ignored. Appropriate topics at table include travel, arts, sport, natural history, and the immediate company. Inappropriate topics include money, politics in anything but the broadest strokes, illness, gossip about mutual acquaintances who aren't present, and anything that forces a guest into an awkward position. The goal of table conversation is for everyone present to feel interesting, included, and at ease. It is fundamentally a form of hospitality. The toast. When a toast is proposed, you do not drink to yourself. If you are the subject of the toast, you hold your glass while others drink, then raise it to the room in acknowledgement. You do not clink glasses with people far away. The clink, technically, should only happen between neighbors. With larger tables, you simply raise and tilt your glass toward the room, ending the meal. You take your cue from the host. You do not push back your chair and announce you're finished. You do not check your phone at table, ever. When the host rises, or when the signal is given to move to another room, you rise. You thank the cook and the household, not just the host. You notice the people who made the meal possible. Money, ambition, and the rules of discussing both. This section might be the most counterintuitive. Old money is deeply ambivalent about ambition, particularly its overt expression. In new money culture, ambition is celebrated. You're building something. You're hustling. You're manifesting. You announce your goals, your revenue targets, your vision boards. Ambition is the engine of achievement, and achievement is the point. In old money culture, overt ambition is considered slightly embarrassing. Not because they don't have it. Many old money families are extremely driven, but because talking about ambition implies that you haven't already arrived. And old money has already arrived. There's a specific behavior that old money finds grating, what they sometimes call working the room. The person who works a room, who moves through a social gathering with visible purpose, pressing cards, making connections, networking openly, is immediately identified as someone for whom this social event is a professional opportunity. Old money does not turn social occasions into networking events. The relationships that matter are formed over years, not in one evening, and everyone in the room already knows everyone else anyway. The agenda is invisible because there is no agenda, or rather, because the agenda is simply to be here, among these people, and to enjoy it. Now, money itself. The prohibition on discussing money is real and extends in ways you might not expect. You don't discuss how much you paid for your house. You don't mention investment returns. You don't complain about the cost of school fees or home renovations. You don't brag about a business deal. You don't ask someone about their financial situation, even in a genuinely curious and friendly way. But here's the paradox. Old money does talk about money. They just do it through proxies. They talk about land, about collections, about quality. "We've had that constable for 4 generations" is a statement about wealth, but it's also a statement about time, about taste, about rootedness. "We spent August at the camp in the Adirondacks" signals access and tradition without being a financial statement. The language of money is translated into the language of culture, history, and continuity. This is sophisticated. It is also, if you see it clearly, a form of social gatekeeping. By encoding wealth in references that only insiders understand, old money keeps its conversations among people who share the same cultural vocabulary. The treatment of staff. A moral compass. How someone treats people who serve them tells you everything. In old money households, the treatment of staff, whether that's household help, tradespeople, hotel staff, or restaurant servers, is governed by a consistent principle: courtesy, dignity, and the recognition that these are people doing professional work that deserves respect. You learn staff names, you use them, you say good morning to the housekeeper, thank the gardener. Specifically for what they've done, acknowledge the driver's presence rather than conducting private conversations as if he isn't in the car. You tip appropriately and discreetly, not ostentatiously, not as performance, but as proper acknowledgement of service. What old money does not do is what they consider the 2 extremes of vulgarity: contempt and excess. Treating staff with contempt, being dismissive, demanding, condescending, is considered deeply ill-bred. But the opposite extreme, treating staff as intimates, confiding in them, bringing them into social conversations, making a great performative show of being down to earth, is equally suspect. Both represent failures of social calibration. The correct mode is warm professionalism, courteous, consistent, respectful, and clear. You treat staff as exactly what they are: skilled professionals performing a service, You honor their skill, you don't humiliate them, and you don't cross the line into social familiarity that they may find uncomfortable. In restaurants, old money never sends food back in a way that embarrasses the staff. If something is wrong, it is addressed quietly, with the waiter, without drama. You don't summon the manager for a minor issue. You don't make the table into an audience for your dissatisfaction. One old money saying that gets passed down: you can always tell a gentleman by how he behaves when the service is poor. Grace under inconvenience. The willingness to absorb a small disappointment without making it everyone else's problem. This is considered a fundamental test of character. Education, intellect, and the rule of breadth. Old money has a complicated relationship with intellectual achievement. On one hand, education is deeply valued. These are families who have sent their children to the best schools and universities for generations, who fill their houses with books, who take their children to museums and concerts as a matter of routine. Intellectual curiosity is considered a marker of good upbringing. On the other hand, academic achievement as a subject of conversation is suspect. You don't recite your credentials in polite company. You don't mention your degree from Harvard in casual conversation. You certainly don't correct others in a way that displays your superior knowledge. The rule is, you demonstrate intelligence through conversation, not through credential. The ideal old money intellectual profile is not the specialist, but the generalist. Not the person who knows everything about one thing, but the person who knows something interesting about almost everything. Who can hold a conversation about 18th century English landscape painting, shift seamlessly to discussing the behavior of migratory birds, and then land comfortably on the geopolitics of sub-Saharan Africa, all before dinner is served. This breadth of knowledge is the result of a particular kind of education, one focused less on professional preparation and more on the formation of a cultured person. Music matters. Old money families tend to have musical traditions. Someone who plays the piano, someone who plays the cello, evenings of chamber music. An appreciation for classical music is expected. An ability to play something is admired. Art matters. Not just the owning of art, but the understanding of it. Old money can tell you about the provenance of the painting in the front hall, what technique was used, in what tradition the artist worked. This isn't show. This is the natural result of having grown up surrounded by these objects and having had them explained. Literature matters. Books are everywhere. They are read, argued over, passed between family members with marginalia in the margins. The old money approach to books is worn in, pages turned down, spines cracked, penciled notes throughout. A pristine, unread book on a shelf is less impressive than a battered beloved one. The rules of friendship and loyalty. Old money friendships are unusual by modern standards. They tend to be very old, often beginning in childhood or at school, and they tend to be maintained over very long periods, with relatively infrequent contact. This is one of the rules nobody explains. In old money culture, friendship does not require constant maintenance. You don't need to text daily or see someone monthly for the relationship to be genuine. An old money friendship may involve years of silence, followed by a weekend together that proceeds exactly as if no time has passed. The continuity is assumed, not performed. What matters in these friendships is reliability. When you need someone, genuinely need them, they appear. Not with a social media post, not with a mass text. They call, they come, they bring practical help, and they do it without making it an occasion for demonstrating their own virtue. Loyalty is the supreme virtue in old money social culture. You do not abandon friends who fall on hard times. You do not stop inviting someone to dinner because they've lost their money. You do not gossip about mutual acquaintances, because gossip is considered a form of betrayal. Old money circles are small enough that anything said about anyone will eventually reach them, and the person who said it will be remembered. This also extends to institutional loyalty. You support the institutions that shaped you, your school, your university, your club, your local church, your community. This is not obligation for its own sake, but genuine belief in the value of continuity and tradition. The flip side of this loyalty is that old money circles can be genuinely difficult to enter. Acceptance is slow, trust is built over years, and once a betrayal occurs, whether through gossip, through dishonesty, through public embarrassment, the door that closes rarely reopens. Social self-control, restraint as character. Perhaps no quality is more admired in old money circles than self-control. This means many things simultaneously. It means not drinking too much at a social occasion, or if you do, never visibly losing composure. It means not showing anger, not making scenes, not indulging public emotional displays. It means, particularly in British old money tradition, a specific quality the English call not making a fuss. The rule is simple. Your discomfort, disappointment, or anger is your problem, not your company's. You manage it. You do not outsource it to the room. This is sometimes misread as coldness or emotional repression, and that's not entirely unfair. Old money culture did historically produce people who found emotional expression genuinely difficult. But at its best, what it produces is composure, the ability to be fully present, fully controlled, and fully gracious under conditions that would visibly rattle other people. Think of the old money figure who receives terrible news at a dinner party, excuses themselves briefly, composes themselves, and returns to the table, who, when insulted, responds with such calm precision that the insult rebounds, who, when dealt a catastrophic reversal of fortune, discusses it with others only when they have decided exactly what to say and how to say it. This isn't suppression. This is discipline. The discipline to protect those around you from the weight of your own reactions, and the confidence to know that your feelings, properly managed, will not overwhelm you. New money versus old money, the eternal negotiation. Let's be honest about something. The tension between old and new money is real, ongoing, and far more nuanced than a simple hierarchy. Old money has always been suspicious of new money, and new money has always chafed at old money's exclusivity. But there are important things to understand about this dynamic. First, old money is not monolithic. There are old money families who are warm, welcoming, and genuinely delighted to meet people from different backgrounds. There are old money institutions that have evolved significantly in recent decades, accepting women, embracing diversity, updating their social codes for a changed world. Second, old money is not always right. Many of these social codes have their roots in classism, in racism, in the deliberate exclusion of people deemed unsuitable for reasons that had nothing to do with character. The Brahmin families of Boston excluded Irish immigrants. The old guard of New York society had walls built against Jewish arrivals. However, distinguished, the country clubs of the American South were segregated. We should not romanticize these traditions without acknowledging their dark uses. Third, new money has always eventually become old money. The Vanderbilts were once considered vulgar. The Kennedys were once considered arrivistas. The Rockefellers were new. Every family that now sits at the apex of old money culture was, at some point, the newcomer trying to learn the rules. The rules themselves are partially designed to regulate that transition, to slow it enough that money becomes culture before the next generation arrives. The most interesting figure in this story is always the person who has the cultural intelligence to navigate old money circles, regardless of their origins. The rules we've described today are learnable. They are ultimately a form of sophisticated social literacy, and like any literacy, they can be acquired by anyone willing to put in the years of careful observation. That person, who learned the rules without inheriting the money, has always existed, and old money has always had a complicated, grudging respect for them. Because they understand something that many born insiders forget. The rules exist not to exclude, but to preserve. They preserve continuity. They preserve standards. They preserve a particular way of being human that values restraint over display, quality over quantity, and character over convenience. The most important rule of all. We've covered a great deal: the language, the dress, the table, the friendships, the clubs, the calendar, the self-control. But there is one rule that underlies all of them. The rule that, if you understand it truly, makes all the others make sense. And that rule is this: other people's comfort matters more than your own impression. Every single rule we've discussed tonight is, at its root, a technology for making other people comfortable. The understatement that prevents others from feeling overwhelmed. The restraint that prevents others from being embarrassed by your excess. The treatment of staff that preserves their dignity. The table manners that allow everyone to focus on the meal and the company. The discretion about money that prevents others from feeling inadequate or scrutinized. The loyalty that makes others feel safe. Old money social culture, at its deepest level, is not about gatekeeping. It's about a very old, very particular answer to the question, how should we treat one another? The answer, refined over centuries, is with care, with attention, with restraint, with the understanding that a social gathering is not a performance you give, but a gift you offer to every person in the room. That's a rule worth learning, whoever you are, wherever you come from. If you've watched this far, you now know things that most people, including many people who grew up in these circles, could not articulate. The rules of old money are rarely written down because they were never meant to be transferred through instruction. They were meant to be lived. But we live in an unusual moment in history. Information is no longer the exclusive property of those born into it. The cultural intelligence that once took generations to develop can now be learned, observed, absorbed, if you know what to look for. None of this means that money doesn't matter. It does. And none of this means that these social codes are perfect. They're not. They carry within them the legacies of exclusion and privilege that we should examine honestly. But at their best, these rules represent something worth preserving, a commitment to the proposition that how you do things matters, that quality matters, that character matters, that the way you treat people in every small moment is a form of statement about who you are. Old money has been saying that for 300 years. It's worth hearing. If you found this valuable, please subscribe. We make deep dives like this every week. And share this with someone who you think would find it fascinating. I'll see you in the next one.